And on Secret, I feel a little bit more of an intimate connection. If somebody's creating something and only I can see the private metadata, that experience, that connection, that level of authenticity that I'm getting, knowing that only I have access to this and somebody else, the artist didn't create it to flex. They created it to share something with me.
Welcome to the Alpha Podcast, made possible by West Coast Customs and Neverland Studios, hosted by me, Jussup. Before we begin, I want to remind everybody that what you're about to hear is not financial advice, nor do we endorse any of the guests or projects on the show. This is simply meant for educational purposes, and oftentimes I'm learning about these projects in real time as we're recording them. While this is brought to you by West Coast Customs and Neverland Studios, the opinions expressed are of my own or the guests, and not of the companies. So without further ado, let's tap into the episode.
My name's Tor Bair. I'm the founder of Secret Foundation. We work on Secret Network, which is a private by default layer 1 blockchain. So we do data privacy for smart contracts.
How long have you been doing that?
Feels like for friggin' ever.
Okay.
Yeah, but not technically. I guess I started working full time on the project in 2017, and back then it was about 3 of us, and now it's about 5 years later, and it's a lot more of us. Global community of privacy advocates and developers and things like that. So it's come a long way. I guess I would say that even before I was working on it, I was thinking a lot about decentralization and privacy and the impact that that was going to have for not just where I am now with like artists and creators, but just anybody who was going to use the internet in the future. And I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time around a bunch of other people who were thinking about it. And so I got to come into the space full time at a time when there really wasn't even a space to come into. There wasn't a way to build a career in Web3 when I started working on Web3, which feels like a complete accident. But it was a happy accident because now looking back, there's really no other industry that I'm qualified to work in relative to this one. Everything that I care about is here, and everything that I hate is in Web 2.
Yeah. Secret Network, break this down.
It's secret, and it's a network. You got it. You're way ahead of the game. So yeah, every blockchain that people are familiar with is a public by default blockchain. So public and private are confusing words in the blockchain space. People hear private blockchain, they think, oh, this is for the enterprise. But what I want to do is distinguish that. There's permission and there's permissionless blockchains. So the public blockchains we're familiar with, Ethereum, Solana, whatever, these are permissionless blockchains. Anybody can connect to them. They can run nodes in the network. They can issue smart contracts in the network. They can interact with those contracts. These are permissionless networks. A permissioned network would say you have to be one of 5 people and you can run a node. You can be one of 10 people and you can read the data on the chain. I care personally about the permissionless universe because that's what's empowering. That's the interesting blockchain revolution. Everything else is kind of like a weird database. So Secret Network is a private by default, permissionless blockchain. And every other blockchain is using that public by default model for their permissionless blockchains. We found a way to use private data with a chain that's still permissionless. Anybody can interact with it. Anybody can operate a node within it.
Interesting.
It's a unique model. Yeah. That it takes a bit for people to wrap their heads around it. So we called it Secret so people could get it quicker.
Yeah, I guess. How did you stumble on this?
So back in we'll rewind again. So in 2015, I was a graduate student. I was doing my business degree, and I was at MIT. And it was right at the time that they were teaching the very first blockchain courses at MIT. And in 2015, people weren't really talking about blockchain. They were talking about specifically Bitcoin if they were talking about anything, and they were mostly talking about the price. And I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time when they were talking about the technology. The Bitcoin core developers were being partially funded by MIT. They were teaching these courses. And the course that I took, the blockchain course, was taught partially by one of the researchers at the Media Lab there, whose name was Guy Ziskind. And he wrote a paper at the time about combining privacy technology with blockchain technology. The idea being to create this decentralized computing platform that also had privacy guarantees. And looking back in time, 7 years ago now, that turned out to be very prescient. But it was like a very long time before people realized he was trying to solve problems that people hadn't even recognized were problems yet. People didn't understand that blockchain had a privacy problem because people weren't using blockchains. And MIT is the kind of place where people go to solve problems for the problems that are going to be created by the problems we're solving now. It's like bleeding edge that just like you're going to cut and bleed to death. So lucky to be in the right place at the right time, because some of these projects take 5 years to solve. So we've been working on it for 5 years. And fortunately, I learned about these kinds of issues in the space early enough that I was in the right place to start working on them. My business degree research, part of it was actually on digital rights management with blockchain. And I took it much more from a business perspective of what is it going to take to actually have adoption of this by artists, by people who do the licenses, things like that. And one of the takeaways after I had heard him speak about privacy and blockchain, listening to Guy and reading his papers, was thinking, oh my God, we're going to need this. Like, artists aren't going to expose all of their data to everybody. There needs to be financial privacy for the royalty distributions. There were so many issues that were going to be solved by this, but also no one was ready to use the solutions. So I started working full-time on the project in its earlier iteration, which was Enigma, back in 2017. And now we're 5 years later still working on the same mission. And the tech has pivoted, the community has grown, but what we're still doing is the same thing. Can we bring privacy solutions to permissionless, decentralized blockchains, and what is that going to mean for the people who then choose to use them?
Yeah, so I could launch an NFT project on Secret, right? What would be the first steps?
The first step is to understand what that actually gets you, right?
Yeah,
like, why Secret? Why not, ETH, Solana, Near, you name it, right? So that public by default versus private by default distinction is super important. The public by default blockchain model means all your data is on the chain by default. And that means everybody has the same access. Everybody has the same level of being able to see what you've done, what you will do, except the miners. The miners actually have even more access because they get to see what you're doing before the state of the network even actually updates.
Right, yeah.
That's the public by default model. Every blockchain uses it except Secret. So Secret has the private by default model, where by default the application's on the chain and the contracts issued on the chain, which include the token contracts, which include NFTs, all of that is private by default. The owner has the right to decrypt their interaction with the contract. They have the right to decrypt the contents of the contract, but you can't just go to the block explorer and see, here's exactly everything that's sitting in the wallet. Here's exactly every single transaction history for that person. But that person can always prove their own transaction history. They hold that decryption key, or they have the permit to access that information. So it's taking the data model of Web3 as we've come to understand it and flipping it on its head in a way that's substantially more beneficial to the user, because the user now gains control. User gains that choice. If they want to consent to the data being used one way or the other, they can. And if they don't want their data to be exposed to absolutely everybody in the world, which most of us would choose, they can choose not to do that. They selectively reveal different pieces of their history, different pieces of their ownership, the same way that we do in the real world. There is some sort of access control. So secret NFTs are just NFTs that have those properties by default, meaning you launch an NFT project on Secret, it can have either public or private ownership. It can have either public or private metadata, or both at the same time. And it's fully programmable, customizable. Maybe the developer is setting these things at inception. Maybe the user is choosing to reveal and unreveal their ownership of an NFT. Maybe they're choosing to reveal or unreveal the private metadata associated with that NFT. It's just a far greater degree of programmability and customizability. And that's better for developers. It's better for creators who want to actually protect the things that they're turning into NFTs. You don't necessarily want to make that public to everybody. And it's better for the collectors, because now these things hold their value and you don't have to reveal absolutely everything that you own to everybody all the time. You can have much greater permissions. You can have private galleries. All of this is done at layer one. It's not some second layer weird solution. It's not a centralized front end that mediates this stuff. It's the blockchain itself. And for Web3, that's the way that it absolutely has to be.
This is blowing my mind. I know you said at the beginning, I can prep you a little bit.
I guess it's more fun if I don't.
Yeah, because I'm speechless.
It's really cool stuff, but I will tell you, it takes 5 years to build.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's been a hell of a journey. But yeah, we're definitely in the process right now of trying to onboard as many collectors, creators, developers as we can, because this needs to be an ecosystem that's 100 times larger. This needs to be the dominant model for the Web3 metaverse. And it's probably, if we solve it, the one thing that's going to distinguish it from Meta's version of the metaverse or Microsoft's vision of the metaverse, which is going to be a walled garden and you're not going to have the same privacy protections because you're going to be required to expose everything to Microsoft or to Facebook.
Very similar to what it is right now when you sign into Facebook.
But then people don't realize that Ethereum has a way worse data security model, which is you sign into Ethereum with anything, and now it's public to absolutely everybody. And they console themselves by sort of saying like, well, at least I didn't, leak it to Facebook. And well, Facebook can go get it right now, man. It's like, it's not hard for them. They just have to go to the blockchain like everybody else, but so can bad actors. There's huge security risks to having every portion of your financial history or all of your ownership records exposed on chain to everybody equally. If you don't have that degree of access control, I just don't see this scaling to global use by, we want blockchains to be used by governments. We don't want them to be shut down by governments. Governments tend to allow things that they see utility for. But I do believe that governments should be seeing utility in the blockchain for protecting and empowering their citizens, not for mass surveillance, the same way that Facebook sees their users. Maybe that part is a little idealist, but at the same time, the whole point is empowering users. We do it through privacy. I hope that everybody eventually sees it that way. But if we don't build these solutions, there's not even going to be an option. There's only going to be, do we go the public by default blockchain model, and that's the option that we chose? Yeah. Or are we going to the super centralized metaverse model where I can't take my NFTs off of Facebook or I can't take them off of NBA Top Shot?
This episode is brought to you by Neverland. And no, we're not talking about the California ranch. You're probably wondering, aren't you a founder? Yes, I am, and I'm not here to bullshit you. Along with my two cousins, Mark and Kurt, our partners Rob and Evan, and the world-famous West Coast Customs, yes, the guys behind Pimp My Ride, we're building a car customization, collecting, and racing game on the blockchain called Empire Ave. Empire Ave will sit in the Neverland world, along with the MetaWhips and the Meta Racer minigame, the Crypto Dad Dadlands mower racing game, and the ever-expanding metaverse that's going to continue to grow. You can find out more by visiting www.neverland.io. That's www.neverland.io. Let's get back into the episode.
So I like it.
Because you said you're onboarding as many people as you can. So
true.
Is that a barrier to entry? Is it more difficult to build on?
Well, I would obviously say no. I mean, I have
you're
to
biased.
say no. I would say that, so similar to a lot of other chains, we use Rust-based smart contracts. Okay. One thing that was important to us is building for Secret going to feel like building for another blockchain? And there's a lot of projects that have tried to do things with zero knowledge proofs, and you have to design your own circuits and things like that. And it not only ends up being far less performant and far more costly and not meaningfully more secure, onboarding developers to that experience is kind of insane because then they're locked into your platform. They can't develop privacy preserving applications, for anywhere else. They learn some sort of very esoteric programming language only for your chain. With Secret, you're learning Rust. You're deploying smart contracts. Smart contracts on Secret work very similar to other chains in the Cosmos universe. So that would include Terra, and other chains that run WASM smart contracts. They're Rust-based contracts that compile the WebAssembly. And we just have a way at the protocol level to protect the privacy. We let you use encrypted inputs, encrypted outputs, and encrypted state. That was the revolutionary piece of the protocol. But from a developer perspective, once you learn some of the interesting things about that security model, that data security model, there's obviously things you have to be aware of because it's a different model from going public by default. So how do you treat things in a private by default universe? But it's not a question of learning an entirely new language. That's just at the development level. Yeah. Once the applications are built, and they are built, we have a live NFT marketplace on mainnet. There's games that are being built on mainnet. There's other minting platforms that you can use. For a creator, it's as simple as the UX is going to allow it. And we want for creators it to feel exactly like, if not as simple as the Web 2 world, we at least want it to be on par with NFT experiences on any network.
Right.
And that is extremely important to us. I think we're already achieving it, but we can always improve, and we have to improve if we're going to onboard, hundreds of developers, thousands of artists, hundreds of thousands of users. You have to have the experience at the center, but you can't just say, we do privacy, so you're just going to have to deal with the fact that this sucks for you. No, it has to be a good user experience, but you can create it through unique technologies and just make it an advantage instead of some sort of performance cost.
So what are some of the marketplaces you just mentioned?
The primary NFT marketplace right now for Secret NFTs is Stash with two H's, so it's Stash merged with Shush.
That's actually funny.
I know it's really fun to use too. Though a big thing is you go on there. So one of the things you can do on Stash is you can browse the marketplace. You'll see all the public metadata, but you can't see the private metadata of the pieces you're looking to purchase. So you can go in there, for example, there's a collection on Secret called Mystic Skulls. You go in, you can buy a Mystic Skull on Stash. You can see all of the properties of the Mystic Skull, but some of them will still be unrevealed, so they'll be filled with question marks. Once you buy it, you can go to the Mystic Skull site and start unwrapping that private metadata and figure out what actually are these other attributes of your skull. And the skull will re-render, and it will have like new attributes revealed. It's like you can reveal the hair, you can reveal the ear, you can reveal the facial hair, whatever it is.
That's cool.
And then you go back to Stash and resell it. It's like, look, I just revealed a rare trait on this skull. I'm going to resell it to you.
Yeah.
But some people are reselling them without revealing any of the traits, being like, it's a fresh skull.
You don't know.
It could be anything. It could be super expensive. You have no idea. So that kind of experimentation is just starting, but that's enabled by the whole stack. First, you have to build the cool gamified NFT collection experience using the private metadata. Then you need a marketplace like Stash where the buying, selling, offer, auction experience is super, super clean. And then, you need to build that community of collectors to build that relevance. And we've done all three. Right. As an ecosystem. But can we do all three 100, 1,000, 10,000 times? What are going to be the killer applications that really come from Secret, both for those standalone projects and for the marketplaces? Like, we're just getting started, so it's hard to say. But I can say for a fact that if you come and you try the whole stack right now, that whole experience will be there for you. Nothing's going to feel like it's missing. I'm just going to feel like it could be so much more.
I said it already. It's blowing my mind. It's cool. I was not expecting this at all. One question that I've been asking everybody, now that you've got all the tech stuff, do you collect NFTs though? Are you a collector?
I collect secret NFTs. I got to own up to it. Well, I'll say this. I really love, I'm a musician. I'm a creator in my own right. It's not my profession anymore. Obviously, I've been doing this for so long, but it was always part of what I do. So I care about the experience for creators. And as a collector, I look for things that I wish I created, essentially.
That's dope.
So, but that's not just from a visual perspective. It really is from a user experience perspective. I think as GameFi proliferates, I will be much more likely to be, I call them, productive assets. Productive NFTs are ones that have utility in how they are used, not just for the flex. And I don't necessarily consider PFP NFTs to have that productive utility. It's really just gatekeeping for a private community, which is a totally valid use case, but it's not necessarily a productive asset in the same way. I'm much more interested in these kind of experimental game universes and how these things are going to be composable across those applications. Secret unlocks a lot more of that than anything else. Yeah. So I don't go to ETH and go shop around for people's really cool artwork on the surface. It feels like a very shallow experience. And I love supporting artists, but I would actually just rather go to like a gallery showing that they're hosting, or I'd buy a ticket to their show. And on Secret, I feel a little bit more of an intimate connection. If somebody's creating something and only I can see the private metadata, that experience, that connection, that level of authenticity that I'm getting, knowing that only I have access to this and somebody else, the artist didn't create it to flex. They created it to share something with me. I feel so much better collecting that kind of work on Secret and then choosing to show it off, because I say, I don't have to show off that I own this from you, but I want to. Right. I think it's so cool that I own your stuff. And I don't have to show off the private metadata, right? Like as an artist, I could put the low resolution version of the image in the public metadata. The private metadata is the 8K version I show in my private gallery. Yeah. So I always get to see that, but I can still flex the public metadata, but use that as a way to pump up the artist and say, I own your work. Everybody can see I own your work. You should buy one too, especially if you want to see it in the big quality.
I think this opens up the ability to really almost gamify the NFT experience in itself. So I make YouTube videos and stuff, and I add Easter eggs. Like I'll literally Photoshop, I'll replace things if there's a door, I'll replace it and say, text this number and wait to see if anybody notices it. And so, doing all these Easter eggs and things like that, that sounds cool. Like having the ability to really play with the metadata, that what's private, what's not. And
it's interactive, and it's a way to say that only certain people have the right to interact with this in this way, and it's mediated by the chain and not just a Discord channel. It is really cool to do it. Exclusive content is a sick use case, because you launch a secret NFT and you're a creator who already has a following. Now what you do is, you go to Stash, you mint it, and you say, in the public metadata, here's me describing what you're going to see in the full version of the video. I upload a 10-second video in the public metadata, and here's what you're about to see. 10-minute exclusive video in the private metadata content. So somebody can go decrypt that, watch a special message from you to them, but it's also now part of a 1 of 100 collection. And now they get access in your community. but the NFT represents both the exclusive access to the content and the exclusive access to you as a creator. It's a way better model than just being like, otherwise it's just like a ticket to the fair. Yeah. And as a creator, that's not as interesting to me as saying, I made this for you. Plus, that's your ticket to connecting me for the rest of time.
Is there a size limit on like how much you can upload?
Yeah, and it also depends what you use for decentralized storage, and we're working on those limits. But I would say, at least in the many tens of megabytes is fine, and that's fine for a lot of people in a lot of cases. But I think we're working on ways where it's like multiple gigabytes is fine. It is often up to the limits of the storage, because if you're not storing on-chain and you're just using secret as an access control contract, you get a lot more flexibility. And there's some limits like to the
point
marketplace.
To it, essentially.
Yeah. Exactly. And it depends, like if you want to have the URL also encrypted or just revealed in the private metadata, so somebody could choose to share the raw URL, but there's a way that also you could do it where the URL is never actually known in raw form to the user, but they can still access that content if they find a way to connect to the contract. Effectively, the contract owns itself. Now I'm getting way too deep about it. I should probably stop at some point.
So, I just looked, because I know you're on a time crunch, and I will probably ask you so many questions that this will go forever.
It's a rabbit hole. So I can summarize by saying we unlock probably 100x of the design space for NFTs, the stuff that I wish had already existed from the start.
Yeah.
And it all comes from this layer 1 functionality. Like it's a huge sandbox right now. Somebody's going to build something on Secret that's never been built before anywhere else, that couldn't be built anywhere else. It'll get 1 million users. I'll be happy, but I don't want to tell people what that is, because I feel like people's creativity is kind of just waiting to be unleashed on the platform, and all I'm trying to do is throw open every door.
This is amazing, man. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
We could keep going, but I know you're short on time. And
we can always do a follow up, and who knows? Like, hopefully the next time we sit down, I'm also telling you about like the next game that launched that onboarded 100,000 users globally, and everybody's doing the play to earn, but it's privacy preserving. It's a sustainable model. Those are all the things where I'm hoping we're going to come back and I'm going to be like, it's not just talk.
Yeah.
But at least I'm proud to say, like, everything I've been talking to you about is on mainnet. These are real collections. You can buy them right now. You can go to Stash right now. You can unwrap a Mystic Skull right now, or getting a redacted club rabbit. You get a confidential cat. You can go get stake and get airdrops from Orbit Wars. Like, this is all mainnet stuff you can do on Secret. And
have you bought any Secret ones?
I've bought so many Secret
What's
NFTs.
The last one you bought?
The last Secret NFT I bought was a Mystic Skull. Somebody posted it. It looks exactly like George Washington. It's got like a powdered wig. It's got like wooden teeth, and it basically unwraps punk traits for your skull, and it looks like a dead George Washington. And somebody sold it for under mint price, because I don't think they were American. They didn't realize it looked exactly like George Washington. So now I've got this super sick George Washington Mystic Skull, and I definitely just doxed it a little bit. But here's the thing: even if I tell you that, you can't go on chain and find my address.
That's crazy.
I can just tell you that I bought it, and if I choose to reveal, I'll send it to a fresh wallet and I'll reveal it just so y'all know that I am the secret George Washington. But like, that's why I can sit here and say it, and you're not going to go and be like, man, this guy also bought like that ridiculous NFT. What an idiot. Yeah. It's like, I like this model a lot better, but I also really liked that George Washington skull.
So cool, man. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
I appreciate it.
Any like social handles or anywhere that you want to shout out, or
why not? Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Tor Bair, TORBAIR. Secret Network is just @Secret Network.
Cool.
Stash is Stash App. Stash has 2 H's. Otherwise, you can find that. Discover the whole network for yourself. Make an NFT thing. We do love giving grants to creators and developers. And
I was just going to ask that.
I would say definitely stay tuned and check out the Secret Network Twitter if you're interested in learning more about that.
Cool.
Thank you, man, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise, bro. Thank you.